Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining in today to review TTI Salary versus Dividend 1 Optimization Worksheet. I hope everybody is doing well, is healthy, and safe. My name is Jay Goodis, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Tax Templates, Inc. And our goal today is to look at just this one worksheet and to wrap up in about 20 to 30 minutes. I suspect I'll take about 20 minutes and leave some time at the end for some Q&A. For the Q&A, you do have option to use the Q&A inside the Zoom platform, so please feel free to put your questions in there. My colleagues are also standing by in case there are any technical challenges. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right in. I will mention that before we start today, on Wednesday, we had a session on the personal tax scenario worksheet and corporate tax scenario worksheet. For this worksheet that we're going to review today, it's really helpful to have a good understanding of those two other worksheets. The reason being is the way how the TTI suite is developed is we actually use these big puzzle pieces, and as we get to more advanced worksheets, we bring those puzzle pieces together. So the worksheet that we discussed on Wednesday, and for anyone who wasn't able to attend the webinar, it is available on our YouTube channel or at taxtemplates.ca/media. That will be very helpful because we're not going to go into that type of detail when we look through salary versus dividend. So just be mindful that you're going to see the exact same pieces of personal tax scenario and the same pieces as corporate tax scenario in the worksheet we review today. All right, so what we're going to do is get started on the salary versus dividend one solution. So the purpose of this worksheet is if we're looking to optimize salary versus dividend for one shareholder, and we can do it two ways, and I will get into those details very shortly. So first off, what I'm going to do is just remind everyone about a few key pieces inside the worksheet. One is at the very top, we have links, and these links will take you to different parts of tabs or different tabs in the workbook. So if I'm on the T2 tab and I'd like to move down to the corporate tax section, I can just click the link. Similarly, if I'm looking to get to other tabs of the workbook, such as the remuneration tab, I can just click the link at the very top, and off I go. So please be mindful of those. I'll also remind everyone about the completion guide that we have. The completion guide will take us step by step through the worksheets. So on the left here, this orange text is a link. So if I need to fill in my corporate taxpayer details, I will click the link and go ahead and put that information directly into the worksheet. All right, so for this example, let's assume that we have a corporation, and we'll try to keep the example very easy today, that has $520,000 of active business income, and let's assume $10,000 of investment income. So that's the income of the corporation for the year. The corporation is in Ontario with the year end of 2020. As a reminder, you can go as far back as 2018, as far forward as 2028. Now, this is exactly like the corporate tax scenario worksheet that I had up on my screen a little bit earlier and covered in the webinar on February 3rd. But there's just one very important difference. And that difference is this worksheet has a payroll tax section. And this is very important for taxpayers who are in BC, Ontario, Manitoba, because they have employer health tax. So what the worksheet will do, if we include the amount of remuneration paid, the worksheet will consider that employer health tax on any potential marginal salary that we look to pay. So if that is a factor that will affect your clients, please be sure to complete the section. All right, so I'm not going to do anything more on the corporate tab. Again, I'm going to keep it simple. What I will do is show you another trick for any expert users of the TTI suite where you are not interested in following the completion guide all the way through. You can come to the very top. You can put in your name as prepared by, and then what the completion guide will do is jump to the next tab. So now I'm going to jump to taxpayer details. And here we have Mrs. A, and I'm going to fill in the information for Mrs. A. So let's keep this again very simple. Let's assume that Mrs. A has $60,000 of employment income, and we'll assume that that employment income came directly from the corporation and also has some interest income of, say, $5,000. By putting this information in for Mrs. A and Mrs. A's base scenario, now what we're going to do when we calculate the results is calculate it on every dollar above $64,834. So one of the things that we do in TTI's worksheets is we always look at things at the precise marginal rates. So we don't start at zero and we don't start at $1 million. We do it very specific for that specific client. But of course, you can start at a zero or start at $1 million if that's what you'd like to do. All right, so again, going to keep it nice and simple. And what I'll do again is I'm going to mark off my name as prepared by in order to skip the rest of the steps on the T1 base tab. If you need more information on how to fill this out, again, that's part of the personal tax scenario webinar we went through. All right, so what I have here, these are the cash results for the base tab. I'm not going to spend time here. I'm really going to just get to the remuneration 1 tab where all of the interesting information is inputted and solved. So in this worksheet, there are 2 things that we can solve for. We can either target individual net cash or we can target corporate net cash. In a moment, I will explain the difference between those 2 and why they're important. Another thing we can do in the worksheet is decide what it is that we'd like to solve. You will see there are lots of options in the drop-down menu that you can choose from, but we do have some defaults already set for you. So in today's example, let's assume that we're trying to clear a shareholder debit balance of the client of $40,000. So I'm going to put in $40,000 and I'm going to click the optimize button at the top. It generally takes about 2 to 3 minutes to run the optimization. So I've just started it. And what I'll do is walk you through all the pieces of the Remoon 1 tab. So first, what I'm going to do is speak about the individual net cash and the corporate net cash. In essence, what the worksheet is doing is we are targeting one number while looking to maximize another. So in this case, what we're looking to do is arrange for our client to have $40,000 of net cash in their jeans after tax, while at the same time maximizing the corporate cash left behind in the corporation. If I use the other option, which was the corporate cash, in that case, we are looking to use a target of $40,000 of corporate cash, and we're looking to maximize the amount of personal cash the individual will have left over. So we're always looking to target one number and maximize the other number. Now you can see in the worksheet here, we have 3 scenarios that have been set up. The first one is using salary only. The second one is dividends only. And the third one is using a combination of salary and dividends. We do have a 4th scenario, which you are able to use. And a very popular one that's being run this time of year is looking at capital gains and capital gain strips. What's really neat about that is we have down below, you'll see an expenses section. And the expenses section can be used for salaries, such as additional T4 costs or dividends for T5s. But for the CG strip, they generally come with much higher fees. So for anyone who's looking at those scenarios, you can go ahead and look at them all side by side to best advise your client. Now we have here our salary conditions. If you recall, on the T1 base tab, we put in $60,000 employment income, and that flowed through directly to here. But if that employment income perhaps came from another source, or part of it came from another source, you are able to override the $60,000 to what has been the employment income from the specific corporation. We also ask you whether or not CPP, EI, and health tax apply, because that will impact us from a marginal salary perspective. The final section we have here is our amount section. And in the amount section, we have 2 key points. One is we allow you to put in a minimum net salary. And that's very useful because sometimes perhaps our clients want to ensure that we pay enough salary to max out CPP or to max out RRSPs. So if that's the case, you can include that as a minimum salary, and we will factor that in when doing the optimization. We also have a fixed column over here on the right. And the purpose of the fixed column is, let's assume that our client was paid dividends. There's an unrelated shareholder, and both of them were going to receive dividends. And they wanted to consider that towards their balance of $40,000. You can include that as a fixed amount. And again, the algorithm will consider that as part of the analysis. Okay, now one more thing I will just highlight is that if we actually had gone through the completion guide on the Remoon 1 tab, where we fill in the optimization objective and then we select what our salary conditions are, when you get to the 3rd step, we actually provide you with the amount of RRSPs and CPP in order to max out either, again, CPP or RRSPs. So it gives you the information that you need for the minimum sell if that's something that you're looking for. So just follow the completion guide through and you'll have that information. Okay, so the optimization is now done running. So why don't we scroll down and we will go ahead and take a look at our results. So first, what I'm going to share is speak about the base column. So what is the base column? The base column is the amount of cash that the corporation and the individual will have if we didn't do any remuneration planning. So if everything was done, we decided, you know what, we're not going to pay anything out to the shareholders. Here's what will be left. And for the corporate cash, you'll see 458,683. And if you're curious, well, where is that corporate cash coming from? Well, I can just go ahead and click the link, and this will take me to the T2 tab where you'll be able to see how the corporate cash is calculated. Similarly, with the T1, you'll see that we have individual net cash of 50,346. I can go ahead, click the link, and you'll be able to see on the base results tab how that's being calculated. So right now our client has $50,346 in cash before we've done any type of remuneration. All right, so in the first scenario here, we're looking at just salaries. And in this case, we're going to need to pay our client $64,191 in salaries. And that's going to net the client the $40,000 target cash that we're looking for. And to reach that $40,000 target, we're going to use $53,500 in corporate cash. So when I mentioned at the beginning, we're looking to target one number and maximize the other. We're targeting 40,000, and we're looking to maximize the corporate cash left behind, which in this case is 405,184. Now let's take a look at the dividend only scenario. In this case, because we're comparing apples to apples, our base column is exactly the same as the first scenario. And if we look at our marginal results, we have broken out the amount of eligible dividends and other than eligible dividends in order for our client to target the $40,000 in net cash that we're looking for. So again, our target. And to do that, we needed $51,367 of cash. And you'll see here that we have $407,316 of corporate cash left behind. So quickly comparing the salary to the dividend, we can see that the dividend solution is a better solution from the perspective is that we're using less corporate cash in order to reach our target of $40,000. Now let's take a look at the third scenario. In this scenario, we actually have a salary and dividend split. And the recommendation is a $55,143 of salary and $8,013 of dividends. Again, if we look at the summary, our individual net cash, we've hit that target of $40,000. We are using $50,502 to get there, and it leaves us with cash of $408,181. So a really great chart to summarize what has happened is actually the Remoon 1 cash chart. It's something I really recommend using for this worksheet. And if we review the results, as I mentioned, you'll see that all three scenarios have $40,000 in target cash that we're looking to reach. And we show you the amount of corporate cash needed to be used in order to target the 40,000. And we also provide you with the change in total cash down below. So if we look at all three scenarios, the salary versus dividend mix that the algorithm came up with beat the dividend only by $865 and beat the salary only by $29.98. Okay, so I'm going to share a few more situations with you, a few more key elements with you. The first is that you do have the ability to optimize each scenario on its own. So for example, if we just wanted to add capital gain strips, in order to make the algorithm run faster, we can go ahead and just hit optimize for scenario 4, and then it's only going to run scenario 4 and add that to the comparisons. So if you've changed just one number in one of the scenarios, you can decide just to run that specific scenario. It is an option. From a conceptual point of view, I just want to speak to a common question that I receive regarding this type of situation where the client says, well, I have $40,000. I don't understand why it's recommending to pay $64,000 in salary when I just need $40,000. Why wouldn't I just pay $40,000? So the answer to that question is when we're trying to target $40,000, I like to pretend that the individual doesn't have any cash in their bank account. That's why they owe $40,000 to the corporation, because they don't have any cash personally. So if we go ahead and just pay them out $40,000, and I'm going to show you this on the marginal results tab. If we just paid them out the $40,000, well, they're going to owe personal taxes. So where are the funds going to come to pay that April 30th tax balance? So let's assume on $40,000, we need to go ahead and pay $10,000 in taxes. Well, we'd have to pay out another $10,000, and then that lead to 2,000 in taxes, then 2,000. We get into this circular calculation until the individual has enough money to pay the tax bill. So that's what we've done with this worksheet, is that we know that we have to pay out $64,191 in order to cover the $24,191 in taxes to leave them with $40,000 so they can pay back that shareholder debit. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the other option is to do the worksheet from a corporate net cash. And in that situation, if I were to run it and we were to look at the results, what we would see is that corporate cash in all four situations would be $40,000. And you'd look at the individual net cash under all four. And of course, the objective would be is to leave the individual taxpayer with as many funds as possible. Okay, so the last feature that I'll share with you, and then I'll open it up to Q&A, is that we do have this this button at the very top, which is called Save Results to New Tab. And you'll see this in the Salary versus Dividend 1 worksheet, along with the Salary versus Dividend 8 worksheet. And what this will do, if you click it, you can go ahead, and what it will do is take a screenshot of this specific tab. So if you were running different scenarios for a client, and maybe one was 40,000, one was 50,000, what you're able to do is kind of just jump back and forth between the screenshots and build your different scenarios and keep them. That gives you another alternative versus going ahead and doing a save as of the worksheet and running your other scenarios. So a really cool feature if you're looking to save scenarios that you've already run. Okay. And there's a question that came in about how to print different worksheets. Each one of them does have the print previews taken care of for us. So in this case, you'll see that it's all fitting nicely to one page. This is my TTI suite, so it does say Tax Templates Inc. at the bottom and has the TTI logo. But for any client that has not yet sent us their logo and would like to have their logo on the footer of all their worksheets, please just send it to support@taxtemplates.ca, and one of my colleagues will put that on your TTI suite for the next update. Okay. And the specific question was about the total results and how to print this. You have the same flexibility to print this tab as well. It goes on to a few pages because of its length, but you will see that you are able to look at the information. So yes, the question was, is coming out on more pages? That's just the nature of how we set the print settings. In this case, we don't have a lot of detail, but for some situations that we run, a lot of the pieces on the worksheet are hidden right now, and we hide the pieces we're not using. So if I were to jump into any tab, say T1 marginal, T1 base, you will see that a lot of the information is hidden. And we do that strategically. So from a review perspective, you're only seeing things that might apply to the client. So on some of the worksheets, it might seem like there's some blank space on the printing just because we need to keep that in case there is more complex scenarios. Yeah. So I do appreciate that it is the first week of February and many of the accountants are in the midst of tax season with a lot of deadlines. So I want to keep today short. There doesn't seem to be a lot of questions at the moment, but I will stay on for a couple more minutes. Otherwise, thank you for everyone for tuning in today's webinar. There is a survey question at the end, which we'd really appreciate if you can answer for us. And please keep your eye out for future updates and future webinars, and please share your feedback with what it is that you'd like to see. So thank you, everybody, and I will stay on for a few more minutes for questions. Thank you for the question. So there's a question about whether or not Quebec works in our worksheets. So in the salary versus dividend optimization worksheet, we don't have Quebec built in yet because we haven't finalized Quebec for the personal side. I can tell you that Quebec is already built into the corporate tax scenario worksheet, which is the worksheet we displayed a few days ago. And it is mostly done on the T1 side. Once we finish building in a few more calculations and our quality control, we will be releasing that. Okay, so good question. The question is about for scenario 3, for salary dividends, how can we see how much salary and dividends we're actually looking to pay? So if you actually look at the results on the Remoon 1 tab, and I've marked them both in green O's, but I'll make them into red X's to make them clear. These are the amounts of salary and dividends that we are looking to pay. If you need to know the breakdown of the type of dividends, you can get that information on the T1 marginal tab. So if I click on the T1 marginal tab, and I just kind of jump over to scenario 3 here, you will see the breakdown of employment income, which will be the amount we add to the T4, and there's other than eligible dividends. And if there were eligible dividends or capital gains, you would see those in the applicable rows. One more minute to see if there's any further questions. Okay, so I see a few more questions that came through the chat box, so let me look to address those. The first one was, how to save different scenarios. So I think a few minutes ago, I showed that we have this Save Results to New Tab button. So you have two options. One, once the worksheet is done, you can go ahead and just save as the worksheet as you would any other Excel document, and you could go ahead and build your new scenario in the other version. The other opportunity you have is we have the Save Results to New Tab at the very top of the worksheet. So if you just go ahead and you click the Save Results to New Tab, it takes a screenshot of everything on the Remoon 1 tab, and then you have those different scenarios immediately to the right. So the Remoon 1 is the one you're able to change at all times, and then you've got the screenshots over here, which you can, of course, rename if there's something specific you'd like to write. Okay, a question regarding optimizing corporate cash. Okay, so at the very top here, so we have two options. We can either go ahead and we can optimize individual net cash, or we can optimize corporate net cash. So if we want to do corporate net cash, we just have to choose corporate net cash from the drop-down menu. And in this case, we can say we're looking to withdraw $50,000 from the corporation. And again, in this case, it's just salary. So if I were to just go ahead and optimize this one scenario, what the worksheet is going to do, it's going to determine how much cash the individual is going to have using $50,000 of corporate net cash. So in this case, we'll see that the numbers have changed a little bit, and because I haven't done the other ones yet, but you'll notice with the red X here, we are now using $50,000 of corporate net cash, and that's going to provide our client with $37,744 of individual net cash. So I might as well just hit optimize scenario 2 for dividends only. And that way we can look at those two answers side by side. And in this case, we'll notice that, well, by using the dividends only, it's going to leave our clients with more net cash than just the salary option. So 39,127 versus the 37,444. Okay, questions coming through about what are these green and red? What are these ticks boxes that I'm filling in here? These are our built-in review ticks, and they're meant to help with your internal process. So we use O for correct, X for wrong, Q for question, M for manager, and P for partner. So we're really big on internal efficiencies. So this is a great way for you to communicate through the document with your staff about where things have been left over. And the staff can use the green O's when they mark something as complete and they're happy with it. And the partner can then come in and maybe change that to a P later on. Gives you a good indication of where things left off. There is one other use of these ticks that I've been using. We call them review ticks. And that is for our completion guide. So if I were to fill out minimum net salary, in order to move to the next step, the completion guide, I do need to fill in the orange box with one of these ticks. Okay, so there's a question here about if you want to max out RRSP room. So what I'm going to show you again is I'm going to go ahead and just delete this review tick here. And if we follow the completion guide here, you'll notice that there's a note when we get to step 3 of the completion guide on the Remoon 1 tab. And it mentions here the amount of RRSPs, and and the amount of CPP in order to max out the RRSP or the CPP for the client. So if that's the case, you can go ahead and put that as a minimum into the relevant scenarios. And then when the optimization runs, it'll consider that. So for example, let's assume we just wanted to use dividends, but we want to make sure our client maxed out on CPP, or you could just put in the minimum amount into the net salary of the dividend scenario, and then the worksheet will go ahead and figure out the balance of dividends to get the client to $50,000. Okay, and there's a question here about different RRSP contributions. So I trust that's referring to, we're in the, say, the 2020 year, and we're trying to decide how much we want to include and deduct. Well, that information can be entered onto the T1 base tab when we're building out the base scenario. So I built a very simple case here where our client had 60,000 employment income, 5,000 interest income. If we want to look at different RSP contributions, we can go ahead and just fill out the contributions and carry forwards available for the 2020 year. There is a section that's being hidden right now because we already hit optimize and reset the view. But if I went ahead and I hit minimal view, we are going to see the RSP contribution section, which we will fill out along with the RSP deduction limit. We do need to fill in both of those numbers so we can consider the impacts for the optimization. Right, now I'll just show that to you now. So I'll just go ahead and click my contributions and carry forwards. And here is where you can put in those different RSP contributions and the RSP deduction limits. And you do have the flexibility, and this is more advanced scenarios where you can go ahead and change different situations in different scenarios. So if you had different amounts of RSP contributions, you could go ahead and fill out different ones any which way. Okay, so the question is in most cases, the third one of the salary and the dividends is best? Well, and we do have lots of different options that you can see from the drop-down menu. It's a good question. One of the things that is very helpful is being able to compare them side by side, which is why we like to look at salary, dividends, and salary and dividends. It allows us to show the client that this is why we are recommending this type of split, to show them the final results. But there could be other situations that are very unique. I spoke earlier about the capital gains trip. It has high fees attached to it and carries some risk, but it is something that a lot of advisors are putting through for their clients due to the potential tax savings. If there's, for example, capital dividends available, perhaps looking at dividends and capital dividends together. That's, again, more for complex scenarios where we have a lot of maybe RD2H and things of that nature. But for the most part, I'd say for the most part of what I hear from our clients, using the salary and the dividend split for a lot of active business companies is the one that they're using the most. Okay, and another really good question that came in is, can data entered into the personal tax scenario or corporate tax planning modules be exported into the salary dividend planner? I will share with you that we actually have an update coming out shortly. And in our next update, we have created a way to do two things. One, be able to move data from one worksheet to another worksheet called personal tax scenario into salary versus dividend, but also the ability to move information from one worksheet from one year to the worksheet the next year. So for example, if you did a personal tax planner for 2019 and you want to bring the information into the 2020 personal tax planner, that is going to be in our next tax planning update. There will be an import button at the very top, and you can click that and it brings everything through very quickly. If you'd like to get a sense of what that's going to look like, please take a look at either the CEWS worksheet, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the CERS, which is Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy, or today's update of investment bookkeeping. Okay, there's just one more question here. Just give me a moment to read it before I respond. Okay, so I think the question is asking is that if we're taking dividends, but the dividends are being paid after the year end. So let's assume that we have a December 31st, 2020 year end, which we do in this case. And then we determine that we want to clear the balance with dividends, but we want the dividends to be for 2021. So if that's the case, the worksheet will default to December 31st, 2020. And when you put that date in, it actually defaults the year into 2020 over here as well. But if you're looking to go ahead and include that in 2021, you can just go ahead and change the year end to 2021 here, and then you'll be working in that tax year. So hopefully I understood your question. That's what you're looking for. But if not, please feel free to send me an email right after the webinar. Okay, so I think that addresses all the questions. Those were great questions today, so thank you very much. If there's anything further, please let us know. Otherwise, thank you very much for being a TTI client, and if you can answer the survey question at the end, that would be great. And everyone have themselves a great weekend.